I had gone through I had gone through multiple things in my life that were traumatic, but one of the biggest traumatic things that I ever endured was being very close to dying. This was in the very beginning parts of 2022. When I was 21 years old, I ended up with a sickness, some sort of stomach problem. I didn't quite understand why or what was happening to me. I just knew that something was wrong. And one of the first things that also came with this issue was lactose intolerance. I didn't, again, I ignored that because lactose intolerance runs in my family. So when I became lactose intolerant, I wasn't all that surprised. Despite giving up dairy products, my sickness or whatever was happening to me had gotten worse. I used to be a certified nurse aide in my 20s, and I loved that job. I'd found a part of my identity at the time doing that job. That job was my passion. That was where my drive lied. That was where my identity lied. I had gone through, I guess, a series of makeups and breakups with people in interpersonal relationships. I'm used to, or at least I had become used to, people not staying in my life for very long. I do not believe that this new chapter that I have currently stepped in, I do not believe that will be my life forever. I do believe that I will find people that are like minded. I do believe I will find people that have gone through their shadows. When I was sick, as the years rolled by, and no, I wasn't really getting help for it, I just kind of ignored it. But at the same time, I knew that something was very wrong, but yet I chose to ignore it. And within, I'd probably say, several years, when I was, how old was I? 27, 28, 28 years old. When I was about 28 years old, I ended up in this terrible flare up. And it was in October of 2021. And something was very different about it. And I would like to go into this a little further. So follow me on this. In 2021, I had started the keto diet in order to help control what was happening to me. No, again, I was not seeing a specialist. I did not have health insurance at the time. So I continued doing my job, continued working on a daily basis, and because I knew that I had my own things that I needed to pay for. I had bills to pay. And hang on. Okay, sorry about that. I had to pause the video. There were some distractions in the background. So anyway, I am back. And what I was talking about was how my illness just pretty much stopped me in my tracks. It took a minute, and I'm not going to lie to you, it really did take a minute because I kept working and I kept going to work on a daily basis despite how much worse over time I continued to feel. Something very unusual. This was the way, the nature of it, how horrible I felt And not to say that I didn't feel horrible in the past times during my flare ups and whatnot, but I had felt this whole new level of horrible. I mean, I felt just way, way down there. And before I go further into that story, I would kind of like to backtrack a little bit. Going into September 2021, as I had said, I was on the keto diet for a period of time to help try and control inflammation in the body because my disease, or the disease that I had, the disease that I had was based off of it, was a big inflammation ordeal. So I I was thinking, and in fact, it was working for me, and I was going to the gym a lot, and I was just doing all these things to to stay healthy. But I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that that's all I was doing. Okay, I will admit that there was a period in time that my drinking had picked up. I enjoyed, at this period in my life, I enjoyed drinking. I loved everything about it. I loved the sensation. I loved how it made me feel. I just loved everything about it. But the problem was is that this one night after coming home from the gym, I had I had a routine going for me. I would get in the shower, I would go outside, and at the time I was smoking cigarettes. And I was a daily smoker, and I had been a smoker for several years at that point, maybe more than several years. And I would think, okay, I'm not sure what's happening here because my stomach was, I was having little bouts once in a while of my stomach just being like just hurting. And I'm thinking, okay. Um, so I went to bed one night. I had work the following day, and I was sleeping flat on my back. And I don't think I wasn't sleeping for long. I hadn't been asleep for very long. And then all of a sudden, I felt a hand right in between, right here, right on my chest. And it started to wake me up because I was kind of surprised. My mom was already asleep. Nobody else was in the house because, again, I was living with her due to my sickness at the time. My cat was asleep. So there was no reason for me to feel this hand on my chest. And what happened was I started waking up. And as I woke up, I felt very insecure. I felt worried. I felt like I was in danger. After that night, this is when the sickness suddenly popped up out of nowhere. I started going into a flare up for whatever reason. And I thought, well, maybe it's the drinking. So I changed a lot of those habits for a little while. I backed off of it, and it seemed to work, but only for about a week and a half because then it started all over again. In October, it got to a point where nothing was helping with the pain. I used to take a substance called kratom, wasn't working. I used to also take pain pills, wasn't working. Nothing was working for me. I was in horrific pain, and I was going to the bathroom 40 plus times out of the day. I mean, it was really, really bad. And to think that I was going to feel worse than I already had been for that time, that was very foreign to me because it got much, much worse. And then over time, I would probably say in January of 2021 or 2022, my apologies. Uh, here's what happened. I started having a pain in my leg, right at the calf. I could literally pinpoint exactly where it was at the time. And my job required a lot of walking. Granted, I wasn't there for more than maybe several hours a day, 5 days out of the week, but still, I noticed like this weird aching pain at first, and as the days went on, it got worse. So at some point in January of 2022, my memory started to fade. My appetite was completely gone, and I got to a point where I had a horrible time staying awake. And then after that, I'm going to tell you right now, I was on autopilot because a lot of what happened to me during that time until I was hospitalized in March of 2022, I don't remember much. What I do remember is muddled. And there are situations that didn't really seem to matter to me. Not anymore, anyway. At the time, I thought it mattered, but now it really doesn't matter. And when I thought, when I was hospitalized, I knew that it was the place for me to be. I knew that this was the time for me to really look at my life. I knew that this was my second chance. Because by the time I was hospitalized, my hemoglobin was below 5. I was diagnosed with C. diff. I didn't even know I had it. And I had some other issues that for some reason I'm drawing a blank on currently. Thank you, Mercury retrograde. And I just knew that it was the place for me to be at that moment. Coming out of the hospital, it wasn't over yet. My issue got worse because the doctor that I had was a horrible doctor with the worst bedside manner. He was a specialist. I ended up firing him and I got somebody else a few months later. And that is my current doctor that I am with right now. And essentially, what happened after all of this, a full calendar year later, because remember the year prior, I felt that hand on my chest. So going into 2023, no, I'm sorry, 2022, in early September, I fell asleep and a woman came into my room. And at the time, I was an active practitioner and I used to dabble in the craft and everything like that. So this woman, I believed I knew who she was. She came to me, and what she did was she crouched next to the bed where I was, and she said, "So, how are you doing?" And I started crying and crying and crying and crying. I couldn't stop. And I said, "I don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Everything hurts." And she said, "Okay." I told her everything about how I felt. I said medications are not working, steroids are not working. I was on 80 milligrams of steroids and I was also on budesonide. Nothing was working. And if you know, you know. So I said, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." She said, "I'm here to help you. I need you to lay flat on your back." I said, "Okay." Follow me into part two.